a surge of salt water and sand. The trop in tatters. Lives and livelihoods lost.
Decimated. You got 3,000 trailers there. Every one of them's missing a roof. Golf carts flipped over down the street. It's bad.
Helene, a Category 4, just offshore, creating a surge swamping neighborhoods that had been untouched by flooding for decades.
If somebody would have told me that this actually happened, I was, come on, really?
And Milton, a Cat 5 monster as it took direct aim at Tampa Bay.
It's the worst storm we've ever seen here. So I just pray that God helps us all.
Devastating the Sun Coast, making landfall just miles from creating Tampa's worst-case scenario.
You feel helpless, overwhelmed. You know, it's devastating.
It was a season we'd like to forget, but a season we need to remember.
So much is lost, but at the same time, it just has brought so many people together.
Now, it's time for Florida to face another hurricane season, stronger and smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Surviving the Storm. I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeff Berardelli.
And I'm Rebecca Berry.
And we are here this year on our Pinellas County beaches to make sure you are prepared for anything.
Last year, we survived Helene and Milton. They brought devastating impacts to the Bay Area. Brutal winds, storm surge, flooding, and damage like you see to this Pass Grill hotel. But they also taught us lessons that we can face 2025 storms with confidence instead of fear.
Most years we say it could happen here. In 2024, it did. The worst, Helene and Milton. Two storms just 13 days apart. They were very different hurricanes, devastating different parts of the Bay Area. Helene organized into a tropical storm on September 25th and set a course that skirted Florida's west coast. By the next day, it was a Category 4, just 100 miles off Pinellas County. And just after 11 p.m., it made landfall near Perry, still a Cat 4. Inches of rain slammed the mountains, triggering landslides that swept into the valleys, swelling rivers and washing away entire communities. While there were 34 deaths in Florida directly and indirectly tied to Helene, North Carolina saw 107, and the total deaths across the Southeast, 250. Then, just days later, the next threat emerged, Hurricane Milton.
To have another hurricane roll in so quickly is definitely very scary, and this one being, coming right at us, stronger winds, it had everyone just in fear.
It started as a tropical depression on October 5th, then a hurricane on the 6th, rapidly intensifying to a Category 5 on the 7th. Milton was one of the strongest hurricanes ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin, and although it weakened as it approached Florida, it still made landfall as a major hurricane, a Category 3. Milton's landfall at Siesta Key around 8:30 in the evening on October 9th followed tense hours of watching every wobble on the Max Defender 8 wobble tracker. Just a slight jog to the north would have brought the storm's intense south side winds into Tampa Bay, powering a worst-case scenario surge event unlike anything we've experienced in centuries. Instead, Milton went just far enough south for its winds to push water out of Tampa Bay. But the surge to the south was severe, reaching 10 feet at Minnesota Key. Milton's biggest impact on the Bay Area was torrential rain, and a prolonged flood event in Pinellas County Hillsborough County, and especially along the Withlacoochee River. In all, 27 people lost their lives to Hurricane Milton, all of them in Florida.
More than in years past, storm surge threatened the Tampa Bay area. But unlike in years past, Helene and Milton delivered on that threat, upending lives in an ongoing nightmare. 2024 brought unprecedented surge to the Tampa Bay area. Even though Hurricane Helene stayed nearly 100 miles offshore, it sent historic storm surge barreling into the bay, pushing water into neighborhoods that had never seen flooding before.
I've lived on Davis Island since 1983, and we have never had a drop of water in the house.
But Helene changed everything. Jeannie and her husband stayed behind and watched in disbelief as the water crept higher.
You can see from some of the videos that the water was coming over the seawall and into our pool and crashing up along our sliding glass doors.
Then the water breached the dog doors and flooded in fast. As the water rushed in and the power flickered, they made a life or death decision to leave.
So I grabbed my dog and we tried to go out the front door, but the water was up about 4 feet on the front door. So we went over to the window, but when we opened the window, the water was right there, so climbing out of it I thought was unstable.
12 people in the Tampa Bay area were experiencing the same terror, but did not make it to safety, losing their lives to Helene's storm surge. But weeks later, when Hurricane Milton threatened a direct hit, people remembered and evacuated.
I'm absolutely convinced that people reacted differently because of Helene. I mean, my husband and I, prime example, we evacuated for Milton.
There were 0 surge-related deaths in Hurricane Milton. Helene, the storm that never technically made landfall here, changed how some residents respond forever. In the year of the surge, experience saved lives. Right on the water on Davis Islands, Tampa General Hospital is at a high risk for storm surge. Just before Helene hit last year, TGH installed an aquafence, a barrier designed to hold back a storm surge of up to 15 feet. And the results were impressive. Just take a look. The aquafence successfully protected the hospital during the height of Helene's surge. We can check satellites and watch the radar, but to really know the secrets of a storm, you have to fly into it. Max Defender 8 meteorologist Amanda Holly spent some time recently with the Lakeland-based hurricane hunters to find out why it's essential to fly into the danger zone.
Every hurricane season, as a storm is brewing and you're preparing to evacuate, a small group of scientists and pilots are doing the exact opposite. They're flying right into a storm. They're known as the hurricane hunters. We know what the power of hurricanes can do to trees, cars, streets, even our homes. Now try to imagine being in an airplane and flying straight into that fury.
We just hit a pocket of lightning and the whole interior of the aircraft just lit up and you can hear the radios pop.
Pilot Andrew Reeves and his commanding officer, Captain Nate Kahn, have each put their lives on the line time and time again. They are part of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration's Hurricane Hunter program.
A lot of times people ask us if we're scared when we do this. And I would say absolutely, but in the moment it is so focused and so trained that you're not afraid when you're doing it.
Buddy. The Lakeland-based Hurricane Hunter crews risk it all to get the critical information that give forecasters essential insight into the strength, size, and path of hurricanes. Each mission takes an entire team of pilots, engineers, flight directors, and scientists. Everyone knows what's at stake.
We're out there to collect information for the communities. What are they going to experience when a storm makes landfall? Trying to improve the forecasts so there's more lead time to prepare.
The data that each Hurricane Hunter flight collects is sent to the National Hurricane Center in Miami in real time. The goal is simple: improve the accuracy of hurricane forecasts.
So we're constantly communicating with the ground, the Hurricane Center, to make sure that we're collecting the data sets that are really important for understanding the current state. And then, of course, it all goes to the models.
It might surprise you that the Hurricane Hunters use 2 50-year-old P-3 Orion turboprop aircraft with no significant structural modifications. Captain Kahn says the key is to ride the storm. Go with the flow, no matter how rough that ride might be.
We allow the storm to push us up and push us down. If we tried to maintain a set altitude, the storm would break the airplane. I've seen the airplane drop 1,500 feet and then come back up 2,000 feet, and then come back down another 1,000 feet in the course of seconds. So it's really like being on a roller coaster.
These two planes are actually nicknamed Kermit and Miss Piggy. But don't let the whimsical names fool you about what's inside. These planes are filled with sensors from nose to tail. As the crew does pass after pass, slicing through each rain band, they're collecting data every single second.
It's sort of like taking a CAT scan of the storm. And so the researchers, the scientists, can push all that data back together at the end of it and get a good, clear picture of how the storm is developing and how it's strengthening.
Satellites might seem like a safer way to get the information they need. While they can see the big picture for each storm, satellites just can't see everything.
Especially in those really intense hurricanes, you can go from 40 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour at Cat 5 in a matter of miles. The satellite doesn't know anything that's happening. The airplane does.
One of the hurricane hunters' most effective tools is the drop sonde. They launch these instruments into the storm, which sends back real-time readings on wind speed, temperature, and barometric pressure.
What's really important when you go fly is not just one instrument, it's how you tie together. So the drop sonde's one piece, tie it with the radar, tie it with the SFMR, tie it with some of the other sensors we have on. That together gives you the picture that we really need, that 3D picture of the storm.
Now, a new tool could help sharpen the forecast even more.
One of the exciting things we're doing at NOAA is using new technology like uncrewed aircraft, uncrewed marine systems, to get us data that we just couldn't get in any other way.
Captain Bill Mowat says NOAA is now using autonomous drones that can fly within 100 feet of the ocean's surface. They can safely circumnavigate the eye wall, often the most dangerous part of the storm, without putting lives at risk.
It's showing us that some of the things in our models, we need to adjust. And so hopefully, we're gonna take this information, we're gonna make some tweaks to the model, and hopefully that results in better forecasts.
But while drones offer exciting potential, it's still up to the hurricane hunters to collect the critical data that saves lives in a place many of them also call home.
It's a pretty unique feeling flying a storm that is also hitting your home. And for many of us, of course we live in the area, Hurricane Milton made landfall. We were the crew of the last mission before landfall, so we're literally flying miles off of Tampa Bay, St. Pete. We can see the effects, we can see the hazards, we're up there flying, collecting the data.
And while they're riding the storm high above us, the hurricane hunters have a message for everyone down on the ground.
We just ask people respond to that. Be responsive, be prepared, because that's what makes all this worth it.
From the eye of a hurricane to the meteorologist's desk, each mission provides a clearer picture and a better chance to prepare for what could be headed our way. In Lakeland, I'm meteorologist Amanda Hawley.
Hurricanes don't care about our cones and spaghetti models.
So you can clearly see that this has wobbled north of the National Hurricane Center track.
And a slight deviation can make a big difference for landfall.
And we're going to continue to watch it for those wobbles, especially because this is when it counts.
The 8 on your side wobble tracker worked overtime in 2024, showing Milton's every move as it approached Florida.
We're all prepared. We're all in it together, and it's going to happen wherever it's going to happen.
And we'll activate it again if 2025 has us on the edge of our seats once again.
So, what's in store for this hurricane season? It's early, but there are some clues. Now, this time last year, the alarms were going off. We knew it was going to be a memorable year. The tropical Atlantic was record warm, La Nina was forecast in the Pacific, and the model showed a robust hurricane season track right through the Caribbean, the kind of pattern that raises meteorological eyebrows. In contrast, this year, the Atlantic is cooler, there's no La Nina forecast, and the models show an unexceptional pattern. So far, it looks nowhere near as alarming as last season. But as we say, it only takes one. Coming up later in the special, we'll dig deeper into the forecast details. Even a glancing blow from a storm can damage your home, and that could mean a long, difficult process getting your insurance to pay for the repairs.
St. Pete Beach homeowners are waiting on the state to help them storm-proof their homes. I'm Brittany Muller, and coming up, questions on when those funds will arrive.
After last year's devastating storm season, some businesses have yet to reopen and some never will. Coming up, we'll show you a long-standing establishment in Sarasota that says despite the challenges Mother Nature brings, they're here to stay.
Preparing for another hurricane season means protecting your family's single largest asset, your home. As aid on your side, consumer investigator Shannon Behnken shows us, now is the time to make sure that you have the insurance you need.
Memories of two major hurricanes battering the Tampa Bay area are still fresh in our minds, and many of us are still putting the pieces back together, but now is the time to make sure your house is ready for another potential storm. Two hurricanes 13 days apart. Hurricanes Helene and Milton caused billions in damages and displaced thousands from their homes. Now, as we prepare for the next hurricane season, many have learned hard lessons about homeowners insurance. I sat down with attorney Matt Winder, who represents homeowners when they have to fight their insurance companies in court.
Call your insurance agent right now. Make sure they email you a copy of that policy, not just your home, but your cars as well. That should be part of what we have in our digital file so that when the storm comes, and look, we should be speaking in the language that another storm is coming. And you need to have those policies immediately on hand and know who's your agent.
Now is the time to take photos and videos of your home and covered valuables. And if you experience damage, document that too, so you have proof for your agent. Make sure you have two insurance policies, one for wind damage and water caused by wind damage, and another separate flood policy that covers rising water.
That's a really important issue that, again, we learned in the last event. We hadn't really experienced flooding previously, and maybe people canceled policies, but the moment water touches the house, your windstorm isn't going to cover that.
Even when you think you've done everything right, things can go wrong. Jamie Jane Grande Holcomb and her husband had flood insurance, but were told by their insurance adjuster that their living room was actually a basement, all because of this 3.5-inch step down.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to even come out and say the word basement in the state of Florida is comical. I grew up in New York and I know what a basement looks like. I lived in basements. This is not a basement.
Our story pointed out the home entrance goes up 4.5 inches before the step down, and adjusters changed their minds. But this shed light on thousands of homes that could have rooms considered basements and not covered. Winder says he has a similar case right now, and he encourages homeowners to make sure they understand their policies and to try to finish repairs from last year's storms before the next storm hits.
If you look around this community, we still haven't recovered from the last storm. So when the storm comes again and you got houses that aren't repaired yet, it's going to be a real problem.
Winder says many of the crisis stories that come to him deal with unpermitted work, and he advises everyone to check to make sure that you don't have work that wasn't permitted, and if you do, fix it now before you have storm damage. In Tampa, I'm Shannon Behnken, 8 on your side.
Still ahead, the pass where boats could not pass. A controversial decision closed it for decades, but then the 2024 hurricanes weighed in. Landfall on September 26th. The surge from the storm was making its way onto our doorstep at News Channel 8 along the Hillsborough River in downtown Tampa.
That's about shin deep.
And then a surprise. The newsroom and our studio plunged into darkness with one exception.
We have a very large television station in Tampa, and to know that we are the only place basically with lights on in the building, that's just, I mean, look.
That's unheard of.
We're just sitting here in a state of disbelief because I never thought that we would see the day where the entire building is out with the exception of the Stream Center.
The power outage spared the Stream Center, leaving JB Buno to broadcast the latest on Helene online, and then on News Channel 8 as well for the 11 p.m. news.
The Stream Center remains on the air. Jeff, let's take us through the very latest here.
Yeah, JB, I mean, we're surrounded by water here at the station. I just went outside and we have 2 or 3 feet of water outside of our station.
We know that hurricanes are capable of destroying homes, toppling trees, and flooding roads. But sometimes a storm can change the land itself. Max Defender 8 meteorologist Justin Mosely has more now on the return of Midnight Pass.
Midnight Pass has been a topic of conversation here in Sarasota for over 40 years. But after 3 storms in 1 year that have changed the landscape forever, the debate on this pass and its future continues. Midnight Pass is a gateway to the Gulf. The narrow channel provides boaters with a way to exit Little Sarasota Bay into the open waters of the Gulf and beyond. Without it, boaters have to travel miles to the north or south to exit the bay. For decades, this shortcut was closed. It began in the 1980s when the pass was closed to protect nearby homes and beaches from erosion. The pass remained closed for 40 years until 2024 when the combined impact of Debbie, Helene, and Milton battered the area, opening up the pass once more.
Milton hit this area as a Category 3 hurricane, and when that did, you had a combination of storm surge and wind. That created this pass more than 6 months ago, and it's been open for 6 months.
The return of the pass was welcome news to Dr. David Tomasco, director of the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program.
What's happened here is it didn't cost taxpayer dollars to reopen it, and it's open in a way that gives you the water quality benefit.
We saw the increased water quality ourselves during our trip to the pass with the help of Drone 8. The now free-flowing waters are courtesy of Mother Nature's might, brought about by last year's hectic hurricane season.
First time in 40 years, we've got a substantial amount of water from the Gulf of Mexico. It's now going into Little Sarasota Bay. It's going to improve water clarity a lot. The bay is going to be back more like what it was 40 years ago.
But with the pass back open after 4 decades, what impact could the change have for homes and beaches that lie along the bay?
The reason the pass was closed because it was migrating to the north and it was going to undermine a couple of properties.
Glenn Compton leads the conservation group Minnesota 88. Compton believes an open Midnight Pass also provides an opening for greater storm surge and erosion damage in Little Sarasota Bay.
If you look at FEMA flood maps, it's common sense that tells you that wherever you have an inlet, you have an increase in storm surge around the inlet. So you have to question whether or not the priority in opening Midnight Pass for boat access is better than storm surge protection against hurricanes.
Compton knows there are people who will argue to keep the pass open, but he argues that boaters alone should not have the only say in what happens now.
Boat access has always been a priority issue in whether or not we should open up Midnight Pass. That's why we are still talking about it today, because there is a community of people that really want to have access from Little Sarasota Bay into the Gulf.
Still, no matter which side wins out in this debate, nature could be the only one to settle it. So Mother Nature opened it up. What's the probability of Mother Nature closing this up without any maintenance?
We've got a win-win right here. It didn't cost anyone money to design it, to permit it. What we need to do is to make sure that we can maintain it.
We know that Midnight Pass, even when it's opened, is unstable. So if you open it up, you really don't, it's almost like opening up a can of worms. You don't know what's going to happen next.
So there's no doubt this conversation will continue as Mother Nature may just have the last word. At Midnight Pass in Sarasota County, I'm meteorologist Justin Mosely.
Surviving the storm continues in just moments. Welcome back to Surviving the Storm. Right now, everyone wants to know the answer to one question. What kind of season lies ahead?
So let's go back inside the Max Defender 8 Weather Center and see how the factors are lining up to influence the upcoming hurricane season. All right, it's time for the moment that everybody's been waiting for. What is going to happen this upcoming hurricane season? Well, first a caveat. It's early, right? It's tough to figure out exactly what's going to happen 2, 3, 4, 5 months from now, but we can get a clue when we look at the early indicators. And one thing we hope is that it's nothing like last season. And there's a good reason to think that it's possible that it's not going to be as active, and I'll show you why. Take a look at the Atlantic last May in the Maine development region. It was on fire, record territory. You can see all those reds. But look at the absence of reds this May, indicating that it's not as warm in the Atlantic. And this tells the same story. This was the last year and how that line is off the charts for 2024, but notice how 2025 is much closer to average in the Atlantic. Of course, the energy for storms comes from warm water, so if it's cooler, well, there's a little bit less energy that's available. Let's look at the Pacific, because this is another area where we look at a key ingredient. Is there an El Nino? Is there a La Nina? Or is it neutral? Well, right now it is neutral. It's neither warm nor cool, and usually during neutral years, we tend to see slightly elevated activity in the Atlantic, and that is the forecast from both NOAA and CSU, forecasting slightly above average numbers. The average number of tropical storms is 14. You can see how NOAA is above average and CSU is also above average. Of course, we can't tell you exactly where the storms are going to go, so we tell you to be prepared every year just in case a storm hits us. Just after Hurricane Milton, News Channel 8's Beth Rousseau was in the right place at the right time. She and photojournalist Charles Muller were covering inland flooding in Lakeland when our lights caught the attention of Amber Henry. She and her 4 children were trapped in a flooded house. Beth summoned a Jeep to provide some light and then helped Amber and the children through the water. Amber told us they were in a desperate situation.
When it got up all the way up the window, it got up the window and it started coming in the house from the window, and the refrigerator started floating. I turned out the power. Me and my children hopped on the oven. And once we hopped on the oven, I called my mom and told my mom, I think me and my children are about to drown to death.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm trying to hold on.
Days later, Beth reunited with Amber, who is staying with friends and family members and putting her life back together.
Oftentimes when you think of hurricanes, it's the category strength, the storm surge, or the high winds that grabs the most attention. But in many cases, the deadliest and most destructive threat comes after landfall, from flooding. In 2024, we saw inland flooding in areas residents say it had never happened before. But last season was not a fluke, and that's why people everywhere need to prepare for the possibility of inland flooding, even if you're miles from our coastline or rising rivers.
As Hurricane Milton churned over Florida, communities that had never
We had on our backs on a couple of things in backpacks. Our little dogs were in their carriers, and that was it for us. It was unbelievable how quickly that water came in.
But as quickly as it came in, residents soon discovered the floodwaters would take their time leaving. Michael Chad Smith saw that in the weeks that followed.
It would test the fortitude of anyone, without a doubt. So, but it could have been worse. Look at North Carolina.
Oh my God.
He's right. More than 600 miles from Lakeland, in Asheville, North Carolina, raging floodwaters spawned by Hurricane Helene washed away entire mountain towns, wiping out local homes, roads, and landmarks. In the end, the storm claimed over 200 lives across the southeast, with most of those lives lost due to flooding. So why is this happening? The causes can be complicated. Increased development in previously rural areas can play a part, particularly for people who live in older neighborhoods. Sometimes the storm drains, dams, canals, and retention ponds struggle to keep up with the population growth.
If there is a body of water and the drainage and the infrastructure has not kept it up as it should be, and the levels are not being watched and pumped down to safe levels before these storms occur, my story can be your story.
But studies also show that hurricanes produce more rainfall than they used to, and the biggest factor is slow-moving, heavy areas of rain. This can occur far from the center of the storm, particularly with weakening or dying tropical systems. Perhaps the most frightening part? How fast it can happen. What starts as puddles can become a rushing river in a matter of minutes, especially when the ground is already saturated.
15 minutes, I knew it was devastating. I knew that because of the state that we were currently in, and hurricane rain is different than your average rainstorm. It is a lot of water very quickly.
That's why fears of future storms have driven the National Hurricane Center to take action, warning people about the dangers of inland flooding. The message is simple: just because you don't live on the coast doesn't mean you're safe.
The NHC has also added new watches and warnings over inland areas that fall within the forecast cone for a storm. Plus, they've also debuted a new mapping tool to better predict where the flooding may occur. And finally, they've started issuing a new forecast.
The flooding from Hurricane Helene taught us a valuable lesson about electric cars. Video from a Pinellas County garage shows what happens when EV batteries come into contact with salt water. And on Davis Island, another EV battery caught fire because of the flooding. And it was hours before firefighters could get to the house. Ahead of Milton, the city of Tampa opened its parking garages to electric vehicles, giving owners a safe place to park for free. Still ahead, lifting flood-prone homes could keep them from flooding again. A new program promises to help homeowners pay for the expensive work. But 8 on Your Side wants to know, will the money be there? Surviving the storm continues right after this. If you face repeated flooding at your home, Florida has offered a possible solution. The new Elevate Florida program promises financial help to make homes more storm resistant. But as 8 on Your Side investigator Brittany Muller shows us, there are some questions about the funding for this program.
The deadline for the Elevate Florida program was in April. Now people like Nancy Biddle, who owns this property in St. Pete Beach, are waiting to hear if help is on the way or if funding cuts could leave them high and dry.
The front 2 apartments, they would become garage and storage. And then a second floor would be built above it, which would be the new apartments.
Last year's hurricane season left Nancy Biddle with a hefty bill. Biddle owns these 3 apartments in St. Pete Beach. Biddle's sister lived in one. She rented out the other 2. Now she needs to get all 3 repaired. But because of the damage done, code inspectors have determined she will need to make major changes to storm-proof them against future hurricanes.
Never having seen anything like this.
And the cost of making those improvements is not cheap.
Right at around $400,000.
That's why Biddle was thrilled to hear about the launch of Elevate Florida, a program designed to help people that need to do more than just fix what's broken. They need to renovate their properties, sometimes even redesign them completely to raise them above floodwaters or storm surge.
I just thought that is fabulous. The state is doing something to help people.
Kevin Guthrie is the executive director for the Florida Division of Emergency Management. In March, Guthrie told 8 on Your Side that the goal of Elevate Florida was to start raising homes in flood-prone areas by this summer.
Not only is it going to help get people out of the floodway, by getting them out of the floodway, that's going to reduce their flood insurance premiums.
In Nancy Biddle's case, the program could cover at least 75% of the cost to raise her apartments if she's approved. Biddle applied February 14th and has been waiting ever since.
Have you heard anything since?
I got an email once saying it's in process, but I have not heard anything for the last at least 3 months.
The state is relying on $400 million in federal funds to pay for the program. Elevate Florida stopped accepting new applications on April 11th, citing funding limitations. That same day, the Federal Emergency Management Agency eliminated $300 million in funding for another program meant to help make communities across Florida less vulnerable to storms. It was called the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, or BRIC. In a statement, a FEMA spokesperson wrote the BRIC program was yet another example of a wasteful and ineffective FEMA program. It was more concerned with political agendas than helping Americans affected by natural disasters. But Ethan Fry of the Florida Policy Institute, a nonpartisan, not-for-profit think tank, says eliminating programs like BRIC can leave Florida less prepared when the next hurricane comes.
They've cut
numerous programs that fund Florida's emergency response network.
Fry says a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to unfreeze federal funding, meaning it's possible the needed funds can flow soon. But Biddle worries that Elevate Florida could face the same fate as BRIC.
I'm not really sure where this goes. If this ends as the government's program has ended, we're kind of right back where we started.
I think they're right to be worried, but it's in that same category of funding that the administration right now is labeling as waste, fraud, and abuse. And so it's definitely at risk. And a lot of the FEMA funding is still frozen. So from what we understand, most of these programs are still held up.
With hurricane season less than a month away, time is running out for Biddle to storm-proof her property. She knows what she has to adapt. She just hopes she can get some help doing it.
We live in Florida. It's what happens. And I think there's no one denying that anymore. We have to be proactive in how we change the way we live.
The Florida Department of Emergency Management did not answer our questions about the future of the Elevate Florida program. They did, however, say if more funding becomes available, the portal may reopen so more people can apply. In St. Pete Beach, I'm Brittany Muller.
Some small business owners are choosing to fight their way back after last year's storms shut them down. Still ahead, how a local restaurant promised to rebuild and just recently reopened.
We always tell you to have a plan, and we have one too. Facing a direct hit from Hurricane Milton and the potential for monumental flooding along the Hillsborough River, News Channel 8 set up a backup studio.
Hey everybody, it's Josh. We are in Wesley Chapel at our makeshift studio. We call this a mobile studio, and basically this is just a studio on wheels.
Conference rooms at the Hyatt Place were transformed for broadcast, with all the equipment needed to continue bringing you critical information if the news center went off the air.
Producers, directors, and the engineers who are making this signal work, especially when it starts to get dicey.
The remote location gave us the chance to talk to people who were taking shelter from the storm.
Right here in Wesley Chapel, the winds are really starting to pick up. We're seeing wind speeds almost to tropical storm force.
And show you the power of Milton, miles from the coast.
That's almost a hurricane. Wind gusts. I can't even talk.
The lessons learned will make us even more
Staple in the Sarasota community. This location here on City Island was forced to shut down for months after last year's back-to-back hurricanes, but management here tells us regardless of what happens down the line, this place is here to stay for the long haul.
People from all around come to the Old Salty Dog restaurant for its laid-back atmosphere, fresh seafood, cold drinks, and unbeatable view of Sarasota Bay. Throughout its more than 3 decades in business, the popular spot on City Island has weathered countless hurricane seasons with minimal impacts, considering its vulnerable waterfront location.
One time before the past hurricane season, we had water in the restaurant, which was a great track record.
But 2024 was different, with Debbie, Helene, and Milton each leaving its mark on the Sarasota area. It was a terrible trifecta.
That was something that we hadn't experienced before.
Hurricane Helene brought in 3 to 4 feet of storm surge, destroying all of the equipment inside the restaurant. General Manager Amy Blair said despite that, they were ready to reopen within 10 days, but then came Hurricane Milton.
All of this was gone, this part was gone, and we just had gaping holes all through here. Everything washed away with the storm.
The inside of the restaurant was gutted, furniture ended up across the street, and half of the beloved boat bar on a nearby dock. The images coming in leaving staff in disbelief.
I was like, no way, that's real. I was taken back.
After Milton, they knew their work was cut out for them and the timeline to reopen was uncertain. But one thing that was clear is that this wasn't going to be the end.
The owners, from day one, they knew they would rebuild. They had no question about it, and they always look after the staff. You know, we're one big family.
5.5 months later, after a full rebuild, the Old Salty Dog reopened its doors, and regulars like Mark Daunt rejoiced.
To have this place again and to see everybody that I've known here for years, you know, losing this place, you know, because this place to me was always like, it's kind of like home.
Going into this hurricane season, Blair says the structure here is stronger than ever before. She says they're also better prepared to handle whatever comes their way, and they want their supporters from near and far to know they're here to stay.
And it's just nice to know that it is going to be here.
We are told it is the love and support from this community that's making it possible for this place to bounce back after such a long closure. They say it's a comfort for them to know, regardless of what this hurricane season has in store, people will keep coming back and the Old Salty Dog will hold strong. Reporting from City Island in Sarasota, I'm Allyson Henning.
Surviving the storm continues in just moments. Thank you for joining us for Surviving the Storm. Remember, making a plan now can mean peace of mind later.
And if we face another challenging storm season ahead, we will be here to help you through it. Good night.